Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Yellow Alert, where we take a look at the latest dev posts and responses on Spectrum, give you an idea of what they've been up to and what they've been saying. Before we get started, if you haven't already, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, hit that bell so you can be notified of all our new videos. We're always covering Spectrum and some of the news on Star Citizen, as well as ship reviews, stuff like that. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, yeah, subscribe, we'd appreciate it. Alright, let's get started. Okay, so first up, we had a post from Balor of Red, and this was a 3.11 live feedback thread. So this was to do with key bindings and controls, so mouse and keyboard, you know, hot-ass joysticks, all that kind of stuff. And there was quite a few interesting answers from the devs here, so I'm going to try and gist them as best I can. It's quite a few questions, so I might breeze through them. So apologies if these are your questions, but we will, we'll try and fire these off as quick as we can. So first up, we had a question from Methine. When I play joysticks to pilot the ship and I use track IR to direct the view, if the mouse moves, the view moves, and he also has problems with gimbals and the mining arm. So Yogi Clack came back and said 3.12 will add some updates to head tracking, and it includes suppression of mouse-induced head movements when active. So there will be a button that allows you to swap between the gimbals following your head and following the V-joy. So basically, yeah, there will be a toggle essentially for this. And also on this note, just a side note, swapping from head tracking to V-joy for the mining arm in the rock doesn't work, and they know that this is currently a bug which they are working on. So hopefully they'll get that fixed soon. We also had a question from Admiral Canopy, and he says, can we expect any kind of separation from EMP, QED, utility binds from the weapons groups? So he finds it difficult to manage dual trigger sometimes, popping my EMP at the wrong time, stuff like that. So Yogi Clack came back and said, we won't add additional weapon groups or keybinds for those. Missiles and other tactical ordnance will eventually be handled by their own operator modes. And Batwolf said, please expand on this. He said more than that, but that's all I'm covering. And Yogi Clack came back and said, what it means is that your ship HUD will go into a different mode for tactical weapons, e.g. quantum travel is a separate mode, the missile operator mode will be another. So in short, the weapon groups you see now will only be used for guns, but not for any of the tactical weapons in the future, which in turn means that EMP will not be handled by the weapon groups either. That's sadly about as much as Yogi Clack could say, and they're going to talk about that basically once they're further ahead in development. So in another 3.11 live feedback question from Balor of Red, it was to do with environment, art and audio. There was a question from Caracal. Could we get more realistic speeds for rain canopy effects? Basically, currently any rain that's on the canopy doesn't move very fast if you're going at high velocity, and there's no streaks or anything like that sort of thing. So that's kind of what Caracal's getting at. One of the devs, came back and said, I agree, and we'll look into this at some point. It's something that has been on our visual effects backlog for quite a while. When we first introduced raindrops, we couldn't do certain things. It was very limited in terms of how we can author these effects. So we settled on a happy medium, which is what we see in the game today. So what he would love to see is these long streaks of running water, and generally improve how speed affects that effect. Pretty much how Caracal described it. So there's been lots of improvements made to surface water tech, and in theory that allows them to express more types of rain behaviours. But unfortunately they have bigger fish at the moment, so that will come eventually, which would be cool to see, but I agree with them, I don't think that's really a priority at the moment. So we had a question from Dell, and questions regarding radar and scanning. So what are the differences between radar and scanning? Does scanning rely on the radar for its range, unless there is a dedicated scanning suite like on the Terrapin? This comes from a discussion regarding what makes a good command and control ship for the fleet. Blah, 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 blah. So we had a response here from Mark Abent, and it said, we are making a lot of behind the scenes changes to radar, ping and scanning, so I can help clarify the terminology for the immediate future. The radar is responsible for passively finding and tracking contacts just by being turned on. Ping actively finds additional contacts or highlights volumes of space to investigate weak signatures. Scanning is used to obtain information about a specific entity. So scan requires a contact to be on the radar before it can unlock information about it. The scanner will have the ability to perform an active detection on the contact, so it will appear on your radar as you scan it. Passive detection is signature detection by just having the radar on. Active detection is signature detection requiring the player to perform an action like ping or scan, so you can see contacts further out. Capital ships have stronger radars, so their passive detection can see things much further out than a smaller ship, but it really depends how strong the ship's radar ping is. To be stealthy, a player can use the following. Be within the vicinity of a larger ship entity or ship entity emitting a stronger signal to mask your own. Turn down your emissions enough to be hidden by ambient signatures, including nearby emissions of stronger ships or asteroid fields or gas clouds. So you can still be found with a ping. The person doing the ping would light up like a light bulb, so you would know the hunt is on. They're also working on a UI display to show your emissions versus the ambient emissions, so this will help basically gauge how stealthy you are. So we also had a question from Fat Lou. Hey Fat Lou. And it says, Moby Glass to spawn store ships. Why can't we use our Moby Glass when in range to spawn or store a ship? This seems like common sense, value added that exists today with rental car companies. So good old Chad McKinney came back and he said there are plans to address the state of spawning and hangars, including from where these operations can be invoked. So he doesn't want to go into too many details yet, as he's not entirely certain that what has been made public, but the goal is to improve. So reading between the lines there, it does look like they've got something on the cards, maybe to make spawning and storing ships just that little bit less difficult. So we'll see. So next up we had a post from Cypher. This one's near and dear to my heart. Combat assistance, mission contract pop-ups. So for me, these pop-ups are quite annoying and invasive, as they are some of the only pop-ups that occur for missions while all of the other exist within the contract manager. With your helmet off, they are even more invasive as the text is massive and does not fit on the screen easily. So basically, it pisses Cypher off that we have to keep constantly having this stuff thrown in our face. So Chad McKinney come back and said the service beacons and contracts are something we do plan on revisiting, including better handling for the notifications. We have scheduled work for a new notification system that will allow for queuing into a Moby Glass app so that we don't have to just rely on spamming players, as well as having configurable filters for muting types of notifications. This service beacon and other gameplay systems that they have in place will be ported over to this new system, and hopefully you'll get some peace and quiet. So that is very, very good news. Next we had a question from Pengu for Life, which is hilarious, and it says, when will planets start orbiting? I haven't been in the community for long, but it's clear that planets are still not orbiting each other. Is this also to do with iCache and server meshing being needed to support this? We had a response from Chad McKinney, and it says, hey, here's at least one thing I get to say at least does not depend on iCache. Haha. No, in the end, there's many small issues that crop up when you turn on orbiting, which we've been able to do for years actually, as it causes problems in many gameplay systems. One example, navigation. Imagine you want to plot a route from a satellite to an outpost on a moon across the solar system. Depending on your ship, this may take quite a while, and by the time you get partway through the jump, the route you took can become invalid as it may be blocked by something that moved into view. This isn't an insurmountable problem, as they do have plans to deal with it, but they just basically haven't managed to get it working yet. So it's on the cards, but there's quite a few things that are quite complex that they'll need to figure out. We had a post from Hars, I don't know how you pronounce your name, Hars, and it says the future of Star Citizen in relation to player-org interaction. So I'm basically just going to respond with Chad's answers here to the specific parts of the question he's answering. So in the future, will we be able to buy, rent hangars, apartments, areas in the verse for ourselves or our organisations? And Chad says, buying and renting spaces has long been part of our vision, though iCache and global persistence are key to making that possible. He also said, have there been any changes to these ideas, and if so, could you tell us what they are? And Chad says, yes, I'm sure there has been changes over the years depending on who you asked and what quote you are referencing, so it would be hard to say exactly. That said, if I could generalise it, I would say that with procedural plants and global persistence, we've afforded ourselves the possibility of being much more ambitious with these ideas than was originally thought possible. So yeah, I mean, more forward momentum according to Chad, but we'll see. Next up we had a post from Sintara, and it says, will the new elevator panels support quick press F? So basically it was kind of awesome that you could essentially just quickly press F and it would use the default for that button that you're toggling, but the new elevator panels do not seem to work with this feature. So will it be added in the rework? And Chad has come back and said this is a consequence of moving to a UI based implementation instead of the interaction system, which has the quick interact feature. The UI framework could have this added optionally. Partially it is a design question, and then there's a bit of thought that would be needed to go into how you dictate the default choice. Then the existing implementations would need to be updated, but it is possible. So he says he might run it by the UI team and see what they think. Then someone come back and said, you're on fire this morning. And Chad McKinney was definitely on fire. There's a picture of him on fire. No, not really. He's a dude. So next up we had a post from CyberwolfTX, and it says, why can't I live in my Carrack? So I've been flying my Carrack and logging out in space on planets, never having to go to a station, but every few days my ship and I end up at Stanton Sun and not where I left off at. Is this part of iCache? Basically, what can we do? And Chad has come back and said iCache and global persistence should definitely help with the bed logout and give us the architecture we need to go beyond that. The problem with the system now is that since we don't really have global persistence yet, there's a kind of Rube Goldberg machine to save off and reconstruct the parts involved to make it work. With global persistence, that goes away, and instead of using a very roundabout mechanism, everything is persisted spatially, so it becomes the common case. So essentially what he's saying is, rather than this being hit and miss, it should generally be a constant. If you log out somewhere, you will log back in at that place. So good to hear. Let's hope that this actually works. And finally, we got another post from Sintara. So I'm going to read this one in its entirety because it's quite an interesting one. It kind of covers something that I think a lot of us have thought about, but this goes into quite some detail. So, will monster lockers be used to fake it in the long run? What about quantum? So to me, one of the most important aspects of Star Citizen, perhaps even the most important aspect, is that Star Citizen goes out of its way to never fake it. Star Citizen tries to do everything all the way, simulated and systematic as far as possible, and tactile enough to allow players to clearly see how everything is done with as little fudging as possible. I think that is a core reason why people don't like the magical elevators that move freely in space, preferring the fully physicalized elevators like those at Grimhex and Levski. The tactile verse is certainly one of the most important aspects of why Star Citizen feels so realistic and immersive. The monster lockers come across as another step, like the elevators, in the fake it direction. A monster locker is a door with a small closet behind it where NPCs can be spawned and despawned out of sight, without any restrictions as to the number of NPCs that get spawned or the spawn rate. Previously, the main driving direction has been for all NPCs to have a full life cycle, have a job at the station as a security guard, shopkeeper, repair technician, etc., sleep in a hab, and have free time to move around and make use of the facilities. The agent system of Quantum holds the promise of extending this plan to the greater universe, shipping people, pirates and traders around the verse, simulated at higher efficiency when out of player's scope, but still moving each individual NPC as an individual agent. Potentially, a player would be able to follow an individual NPC, i.e. a trader, as they join the crew of their trade ship, take off and fly somewhere else, land and go about their business in general as they move around the verse. Ideally hope we would even be able to sneak aboard the NPC trader's ship and see the crew go about their full lives aboard the ship as they run their trade route. Maybe even reveal ourselves as a stowaway and have an impromptu adventure along with the traders of the previously nondescript NPC ship, depending on the personalities of the captain and the crew. Monster Lockers go against the grain of this plan. Rather than having NPCs live a full and complete life cycle, the point of Monster Lockers is to spawn NPCs out of nothing, have them perform some specific task in the world, then return to a Monster Locker to be despawned. Makes things easier. This is why games traditionally do it this way. You don't need to care about having NPCs move to a place where they are needed, you just spawn them out of thin air whenever you need them. It also makes it clearly fake when whatever supply you need of NPCs, up to and including an endless supply, can come pouring out of an artificially closed off small space hidden behind a door. It doesn't systematically fit together with the rest of the verse, and like the elevators, it will be noticeable. A player can never follow an NPC into a Monster Locker. You can never see the full life cycle of such an NPC because the NPC will not have a full life cycle. It will just be spawned and despawned as needed. It devalues the NPC dramatically. You know that the NPC was spawned for the sake of this occasional thing, and it will be despawned once that task is complete. The NPC has no impact at all on the larger life of the verse. So, my question is this: are Monster Lockers intended as a long-term solution? Are they intended to exist in the game at release? Or are they a temporary measure that will be removed once Quantum comes online and can create full NPC life cycles? What an amazing question. Really, really good question. So, Chad McKinney has come back with an equally long answer, and I will read the whole thing. The spawn lockers are indeed going to be part of a long-term solution of the game, but there are some key details you may not be aware of. First, there is an assumption here that the entities spawned by these lockers are completely blank slates, and when they despawn will never be seen again. That isn't going to be the case for all the NPCs, as there's at least two mechanisms we are going to use to which would result in a similar behaviour to what you are looking for. First, there will be a class of NPCs of higher importance that will have some amount of virtual simulation even when no players are around. These NPCs could be part of a mission, for example, and their schedules and movements through the verse will be simulated in the back end. When you encounter one of these, they may spawn or leave an area via a spawn locker depending on the circumstances, and you will likely see them again later. Another case is that the back end will actually track entities that have been created via a character archetype creation service, and each of these entities will have various properties and tags that can be used to pattern match against frequent requests. That means, for example, if you possibly steal something from a shop or try to mug somebody and security gets called in dynamically, there's a chance that the same security officer may bust you later or get called in for backup at a traffic stop. Given the scope of the world we are trying to create, it would be actually impossible to simulate all their schedules and every detail of their life, but we can split the difference by using a combination of dynamic creation, virtual simulation, and pattern-matched reuse to bring the kind of gameplay you're looking for. Spawn closets or spawn lockers are simply a way to get entities into and out of a place, but they aren't the progenitors of that entity in our game world. Instead, the character archetype system is what will track these, so their scheduler may have them board a train, go to work, come back, get dinner, go to sleep, etc. And yes, in some of those movement points there may be a spawn locker involved, but it doesn't mean that every NPC you see is only probabilistic. The idea is that Quanta and the other systems like the dynamic mission system will be able to use spawn lockers to help move entities throughout the world, and when there are surges necessary, security backup, etc., have a way to get NPCs in the necessary areas without breaking immersion. Also, keep in mind the spawn lockers won't be the only way this can happen, as when you're out in the middle of space or in random areas on a planet, other mechanisms can be used, like QT spawned NPCs or dropships. So it's very interesting to kind of listen to the way that they're going to kind of make all this work. What Sintara's saying is valid, definitely valid. What we don't want is this ability to just spawn armies of people out of a tiny little room somewhere. But what Chad's saying makes sense, that they're going to have to use a mixture of everything to kind of populate the world, because you can't have a million NPCs just going about their day, it would be horrendous. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to kind of see how that progresses and kind of what it looks like to us in game. So yeah, very excited. Okay, so there you have it. That's a little bit longer than normal. Quite a few good posts there, and I hope you don't mind me reading some of these out in full. Yeah, very interesting stuff. So we hope you liked this video. We hope you found it informative or amusing. And if you did like it, don't forget, hit that like button and subscribe for more Star Citizen content. And don't forget to jump in those comment sections. Let us know what you think of these dev posts. Do you think that they're covering enough stuff? Do you think that perhaps we need a little bit more dev involvement? Who knows? Yeah, let us know your opinions on these in the comments. And thanks everyone very, very much for watching. And hopefully we will see you later on for a stream. And that would be lovely. Thanks guys. Bye bye.